think Ichiro's done drinking water, so we can commence. Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be making a fall granny square vest. All because my hands can't seem to stop making this pumpkin granny square. If you're also interested in making it, then I will remind you that I do have a tutorial for it. The link is in the description box below and in the iCard above. I honestly cannot stop making this. So before we begin, I know that not everyone likes granny squares, and I'm not judging you for it. I can completely understand why you would not be team granny square, and that is completely acceptable. You don't have to like granny squares. However, I hope that if you're still watching this, then you find the video mildly entertaining and perhaps get your own ideas for how to crochet a fall themed vest this fall, or you know what designs to look for in a fall themed vest. Now we've already made one granny square vest in this channel, and it was my Galentine's vest. You can find the vlog for that here as well. However, we will be fundamentally changing some things. We're going to be adjusting the length and width of our sweater vest based on the Galentine's template, and that will require a little bit of maths. But first, what design ideas do I have here? So basing this off the Galentine's vest, I know that I want to work bottom up and that I want to do some armhole shaping and probably do around, I don't know, 7 or 8 granny squares for the width, but I also want to reduce the amount of granny squares for the neckline as well as the shoulders. Now that we have a basic construction idea, let's head on over to the stash to figure out our color choices. Right off the bat, this seems very promising. And also, I think I need a main color and possibly a woolly... Oh, okay, I think I'm going to go with this one. We've been to the stash. So, again, let's review. We have two options for the main color of the granny square. One is this ivory. It is, I would classify this more as a sport weight yarn. It is a blend of like soy, silk, wool, and cotton, if I'm not mistaken. But backup plan, we have comfy fingering weight, and this is a We Crochet cotton acrylic blend, and I know this is fingering weight. For the pumpkin itself, we have this beautiful turmeric colorway. This is Stroll. It's also a fingering weight yarn, but this time it's a fingering wool nylon blend. I have like 30 grams left of this because it was left over from when I crocheted my misdirection socks, which I love those socks. I wear them every October, or let's be real, ever since the autumnal equinox. That's when I start wearing them. And if you've never seen these socks, because hello, hi if you're new, and if you're not, you may have forgotten. These are the misdirection socks, and I love them. They're a work of art, if I do say so myself. So for the pumpkin, we've got this. And then for just the one stitch, I don't have brown in fingering weight, so I'm thinking of using this green because it also has a bit of a turmeric color. So I think it'll pull it all together very, very nicely. Of course, the only way we can find this out is by swatching. So I think I'm going to be using a 3.5 or a 3.25 millimeter crochet hook, possibly swatch in both, and then we can get back to seeing how many squares we need to make up our pumpkin vest. I'm starting with the turmeric color to do the actual pumpkin part of our pumpkin granny square, and I'm using the 3.25 hook as mentioned. If you need details on how to crochet the pumpkin granny square, then I will leave that tutorial linked in the iCard above and in the description box below. But for now, we're gonna speed run! Well, here we have the square, but I don't know if you can see this. It's a little bit too big. So I'm going to have to cut it To be honest, there's something about it that I don't like, and I think it's this green stem with the combination of this kind of pumpkin-y turmeric orange. I don't like that combination. But how does this measure? Time to math. Okay, so our square is 3 by 3. That means that our nearest multiple to 37 is 12 times 3, which is 36. That's fine. 36 inches wide. We can play around a little bit by adding some granny stitches around the seam. That's not a big issue. The big issue for me is that in order to get this vest to be 17 inches long, we're gonna need a lot of squares. So let's take it to 5. That needs to be 5 rows, and that'll equal about 15 inches. My math is correct, right? That would be 12 wide and then 5 rows. And
that is 60 granny squares for this vest.
Methinks we're gonna be finding a little bit of a thicker yarn. So back to the drawing board with materials. Okay, so we don't have much in the way of color choices. I decided to go with a sport weight yarn and a 4mm hook. Now, we have this. This is very woolly wool. I think it would be great for the pumpkin. It'll give the vest a bit of a rustic edge, especially paired with our discarded sport weight option for the outside of the granny square. And the stem, I think it'll be really fun just to do this dark emerald green. These are our colors now. Well, let's swatch. You know, I sure do frog a lot for someone that finds frogs a little bit icky. So now we are once again back in square one. I need a 4mm hook. I've conjured one. And I'm going to do this, just, again, follow my pumpkin granny square pattern, but this time using heavier weight yarn. I hope. Let's fast forward this, fellow humans, because I'm gonna be here a while. Yeah. I think you can tell by my face that I am much happier with the color combinations in this square. Let's compare sizes. Okay, I've got my ruler. 3.5 by 3.5. That was a little bit underwhelming. Okay, now, this is the tiny little itsy bitsy square numero uno, and this is the bigger sister, square numero dos. Which one do we like? On the right, we have square number 2. On the left, square numero uno. I like number 2, so I think we're going to go with number 2. However, for more accurate measurements, I will block this granny square, which means that we will take a break until further notice to block and dry our lovely woolly pumpkin. Good morning. Now you're correct. Normally I wouldn't talk to you until after I've had my first cup of tea in the morning, but I thought it was essential that we chat. Now we're gonna have to make this a quick chat because I don't want my tea to get cold. Right, we're firmly in the camp of 3.5 by 3.5, which means that I'm actually gonna do 4 rows instead of 5, and we're gonna need 11 squares to settle on the width, and the width would actually end up being 30, God, I forgot the math. The point is we're gonna need 11 of these lovely pumpkin squares, and we're gonna need a total of 44 pumpkin granny squares for our vest, because I have decided we're gonna make this as kitschy as possible, so we're not gonna alternate the pumpkin with a solid granny square. What else did I do last night other than calculate? Thank you. Thank you. So what else did I do? I crocheted 3 pumpkins already, because remember when I had 3, now I can't find the other one. I used it in a photo shoot and it's gone. Don't you just hate it when things just disappear like that? You put something down, you know you put it down, you know exactly where you used it, and all of a sudden it grew legs and just disappeared into the ether. All I'm saying is it's not very friendly. Apologies for the dramatics, it has been found. We now again have 4, which means we only need to do 40 more. Before we continue our crafty endeavors, we need a bit of an autumnal ambiance, and this video delivered. I will link it for you below. The best part about using woolly wool yarn is that you can simply felt the edges together and you don't have to worry about hiding in extra ends. After crochet time, it is snack time. This is a glorious peach bread. I will link the recipe below because it's here on YouTube. We began today with 1, 2, 3 pumpkins, and now we get to add 4, 5, 6, and 7 pumpkins. Like that magic. Good morning. Today is Thursday, August 22nd. Okay, we've reached the point in the project where Clarissa just goes, what happens if I don't do what I said I was gonna do? I know. Don't worry, we're still making a vest, okay? But just come closer. We changed the design. Okay, so we're still making a vest. We're just gonna change the design. I know we started with this right here, which was kind of like based, not kind of, it was based off of the Galentine's vest that I crocheted in February with you. And then I was thinking, what if we went crazy and did a more oversized vest? What does an oversized sweater vest look like? And I realized that all these vests have in common V-necks. Yeah. There were several different ways we could have pieced together a V-neck, but I thought the simplest way to share with you and with me was to take inspiration from modular crochet, which basically means we are going to do 2 rectangles, join them in the middle, and then leave a gap. Let's prop you off and show my model. In order to do a long oversized granny sweater vest, we're going to need a lot of granny squares, but for now, let's get the idea. So I'm going to do a width of 3 granny squares on either side, a total of 6 granny squares for the front, and then I'm thinking of doing 5 granny squares long, but that's just a work in progress at the moment. The idea might shift again for all I know. For the moment, we're going with this simple but mighty construction, and I really hope it works. There's just so many different ways that we can build this, right? And while that is also fascinating, it's making me feel like, what if we choose the wrong one? And that's just silly, because we're creating stuff together. And the fun part about crocheting things like this with no plan is the journey, kind of seeing where your brain takes you. Like, we already went from doing a fully seamed sweater vest to deciding on a V-neck. So that's already one change, but I don't think I have anything more illustrious to say. So I'm gonna go listen to an audiobook while we crochet the last 5 squares for our vest, and then we can start seaming. 50 grams of our main color, which is the buttercream yarn that you see here. It gave us 19 squares, so now it's time to wind up some more yarn and continue our crafting ventures. Once our granny square crochet is complete, it is time to seam. I am thinking of just doing a simple whip stitch seam for our granny squares. That way it's easy to pull out if I change my mind on any of the construction. I'm starting my whip stitch from the chain 1 in the granny corner, and I'm gonna stitch in all the way up to the other chain 1 of the granny corner. Once I joined 2 granny squares at the bottom, I decided to join in columns, so now I'm joining 2 granny squares at the top by putting my yarn needle through that chain 1 in the granny corner and pulling tightly to join these granny squares together. You can really choose any way of joining them that you want. I just went with whip stitches and columns so that I would have to minimize the ends I wove in. Now that we have one panel sort of complete, we can try it on. So at the very bottom, I have 2 rows of 3 granny squares each, okay? And then for the top, we have 3 rows of 2 granny squares each. This is because by reducing 1 granny square on either panel, we are creating the space for our armhole. Okay, now that we have 2 panels, we can proceed to seam down the middle and leave an opening for our V, which will hopefully look something like this. Okay, so I decided to seam 3 rows in the middle and then leave the top 2 rows open, so this is the start of our V. Yesterday, as you saw, we tried on the vest. Now, I think I still need to do 2 more squares just to go right over the shoulder and then to the back of the top to make sure that it doesn't pull to the front or to the back, and also that the V is actually V enough. So in order to do that, we gotta make 2 more pumpkin granny squares and then 2 granny triangles. Current granny square count is 24 plus 2 that we are currently making, so our total granny square count as of right now will be 26, well, by the end of this segment. Next up, we are going to crochet 2 granny corners. For these granny corners, I decided to simulate the pumpkin a little bit by doing our first 2 rounds with the lovely orange yarn, then starting on our buttercream color, but right in the middle switching to our teal. And I think at least that emulates the pumpkin a little bit, or at least the colors that we used for the pumpkin granny square, and it makes me quite happy, I have to say. Okay, so far we have added 1 whole granny square and 1 granny triangle to either side or either one of our panels. So we should have something that looks a little bit like this. And if you're wondering, this is my vest number 2 that I'm just laying my squares on. 26 granny squares, 4 granny triangles, 3 hour seaming for a pumpkin vest. So we saw the front of the vest. For the back of the vest, I have two ideas. One is to just completely do a double crochet panel, and the other one is to use granny stitches. Now in the Valentine's Day vest that we did do granny stitches for the back. So this time I feel like I want to do something a little bit different. And I might just end up doing double crochet stitches. You know what? We'll see. We'll start with the double crochet stitches, and if we don't like that, we could always frog back to the first row and let's just get started. Before we start the back panel, let's measure the width of the front panel so that both our panels have the same width and give us a little bit of an oversized look. We're going to be using the same buttercream color yarn, which was to say this is undyed yarn, but anyway, the color, it looks a little bit buttercreamy. And I'm also going to be using the 4mm crochet hook. I'm going to start by doing foundation double crochet stitches, and based on the width of the front panel, I am going to be doing 75 foundation double crochet stitches. In order to have the jolliest of times while you are crocheting, I highly recommend that you listen to an audiobook. In this case, I'm going to continue listening to What the River Knows by Isabel Ibáñez. Now, if you saw my podcast, you know that I did not finish this book, not because I wasn't highly entertained, but because the ending was not going to be to my liking, and there is a second book, so I figured I'll wait till the second book comes out, read the ending of the second book, and if I like it enough, I'll probably go back and finish the series or restart it, I guess. And this is your PSA to please always remember to take good notes while you're working on a project, because you never know when you might want to go back and remake a project and then you realize you have 0 helpful notes. We are trying to avoid that this time around, my friends. Yes, we are. Continuing with the back panel, we're going to be alternating double crochet and half double crochet rows for a total of 7 inches. For me, that was about 17 rows. Now, after we complete these 17 rows, it is going to be time to do some decreases to get our armhole shaping. I'll meet you back here. Measuring our back panel, I think we still have, yes, we do. We still have a little ways to go. Our back panel currently measures 6.5 inches, and that's stretching it a little bit. And we need our back panel to measure closer to 7 inches, because that is how much our granny square panel measures before we get to the armhole shaping. So this one measures, yeah, 7.5 inches. So we still have 1 inch of crochet to go. Bottom part of the back panel is complete. There's about 17 rows here, and now it's time to start my decreases for the armhole shaping. In order to do my decreases, I am going to be working invisible decrease method. I have a tutorial on that if you need any help, but essentially you're going to be pulling up the front loop of the next stitch and the back loop of the following stitch, yarning over, pulling up, and then completing your stitch. This for me happens to be a half double crochet row, so I am working half double crochet decreases. And I'm decreasing 2 stitches at the beginning of the row and then 2 stitches at the end of the row for a total of 4 decreases in this row. And once we are 4 stitches away from completing the row, it is time to complete our last sets of decreases. So again, I'm doing 2 half double crochet decreases at the end of the row. This should take us from 75 stitches to 71 stitches because we've decreased 4 stitches. Now I'm going to chain 1 and turn, and in my next row I'm just going to complete a double crochet in each stitch. So we're not doing any decreases for this row, we're simply working a double crochet in each half double crochet stitch. So to shape our armhole, we're going to be alternating a decrease row and a non-decrease row until we reach the slope of the front panel. So as you can see here, I am shaping and we are following that slope of the granny triangle. Now our next row should be a decrease row, and I'm once again doing 2 half double crochet decreases at the beginning of the row and at the end of the row. So on the screen, I'm going to put that we're going to be repeating rows 1 and 2. So our decrease row is row 1, and row 2 is a double crochet row. We're going to be repeating rows 1 and 2 4 more times, which means we have a total of 5 decreased rows for the armhole shaping. Here is our steep incline after completing the decreases. I've decreased a total of 20 stitches. So we went from 75 to 50. We went from 75 to 55 stitches. And now I'm just going to continue alternating my double crochet and my half double crochet rows until I reach the top of the vest, and I will of course check back in to let you know how many inches / rows that was. My piece now is going to measure 18 inches, or as close to 18 inches. It's a little tiny itsy bitsy bit shy of 18 inches. But what I can tell you is that after completing the armhole shaping, I completed 19 rows in the pattern, and then I decided to add a bit of short row shaping at the top so that the shoulders lay nicely on my body. If you have any questions on what short rows are, I do have a separate video tutorial all about short rows. For this pattern, I'm just going to do around 2 or 3 short rows. I'm going to start with a slip stitch on my hook. To crochet the short rows, I attached yarn to the leftmost stitch and worked 15 single crochets. Then I'm going to chain 1 and turn and work 7 single crochets. After the 7 single crochets, I'm going to slip stitch in the next stitch, pull that slip stitch tightly, and then we are going to skip the slip stitch and work a single crochet in each of the single crochets. We should have a total of 7 single crochets for what is row 3 of our short row shaping. As I said, I do have a separate tutorial all on short rows, and I chose 15 stitches because that is the number of stitches that I was going to have to connect to the granny square in the front panel. Next, I'm going to chain 1 and turn, and I'm going to work a single crochet in each stitch. Now, if you've worked short rows before, you know that the stitch we slipped into to turn, we're going to work a single crochet in there too, okay? Our slip stitches do not count as stitches when we're working short rows. They count as connecting points. After completing all our short rows, it is time to cut our yarn and fasten off. Now the next thing I would tell you is to fasten off with a long tail so that we can use our same tail to sew on our front panel. And we're just going to be sewing the shoulder seams at the moment because we're not quite done with the back panel. Okay, let's join our shoulder seams so that we can have our first official try on with this garment and see if we actually like how the vest is working up. To join the shoulder seams, I decided to employ slip stitches, and I'm inserting my hook into the front loop of the stitch in the panel facing me and the back loop of the stitch in the panel that's away from me, and I'm just slip stitching. This creates, I think, a bit of a flatter seam when you're using slip stitches, and it still creates a strong enough point for our shoulders. Okay, so not terribly bad for our first try on, but I do think I'm going to add some width to the sides and then try it on again and see how we're liking it. For the width of the back panel, what I decided to do was at the bottom, marking the first row where we began our decreases to the base of the granny triangle. And I'm going to be using stitch markers to mark the points where I will be creating my granny stitches. The first marker corresponds to the double crochet to kind of begin this row. And then I will have a total of 8 granny stitches. With right sides of the back panel facing me, I am attaching yarn to that first stitch marker, and I'm going to be doing a double crochet. And then in each one of the following stitch markers, I'm going to work a granny stitch. Okay, so it's our first official try on, and I don't really like how it fits. I think this construction would be fine if we were doing a crew neck, but I really want a V-neck, so back to the drawing board it is. Let's take out granny squares and get our V-neck vision back. So I took out 2 whole granny squares from either side as well as the granny triangle, and we are back to the drawing board as to what will look best. I'm pretty happy with how the vest sits now, so I'm just going to continue seaming down the middle until we get to kind of like the base of the granny triangles, and I think that will give us a nice neckline. So our vest construction now looks like this. Right, now on to the armholes. So I already did one, so I know this works. But what we're gonna do for the armholes is that first we're gonna pick up stitches in crochet, and then we're gonna switch to our knitting needles. Now this is optional. You can of course do the armhole completely in crochet. I just favor the way knit ribs look when combined with crochet. To complete the armholes, we're going to be needing our 4mm crochet hook, as well as a 4mm needle and a 4.5mm needle. 16-inch cable circular knitting needle. Yes, we're going to be using all these 3 supplies if you also want to knit your rib. We are going to start our armhole at the base. Sorry, we're going to start our armhole rib at the base of the armhole. So that means at the very bottom part of the armhole, we're going to be adding yarn, inserting our hook, and working single crochets. We're going to be working a total of 109 single crochets around our armhole. This can be divided by working 56 single crochets in the front panel portion of our armhole and 53 in the back panel portion of our armhole. The best thing here is just to space them as evenly as possible so you don't leave any obvious gaps in your stitching. Sometimes joining the granny squares can leave a little bit of a gap between the granny squares that we kind of want to smooth over, and I do that by working a decrease. And after we crochet our stitches, it is time to knit. So I'm going to be using my 16-inch circular 4.5 millimeter needles to pick up stitches. And what I mean by that is that we're going to be inserting our knitting needle into the loop that we left from the first stitch. And then we are going to be inserting our knitting needle in each single crochet around, and we're going to be picking up 110 stitches. So this does mean that somewhere at some point you're going to use the front loop of a single crochet to pick up a stitch, and then use the back loop of a single crochet to pick up a stitch. To work my rib, I'm going to be knitting through the back loop and then purling one. So it's basically a knit one, purl one rib, and I believe this is called a twisted rib because I'm knitting in the back loop, but correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, this is the equivalent, we could say, of working a front post double crochet followed by a back post double crochet for the rib. So if you feel more comfortable doing that, then please do so. It's just that your first row, instead of knitting like I'm doing here, is going to be doing double crochet stitches so that you don't pick up raised stitches from the single crochet, because that would cause your armhole to tighten quite a bit. I'm going to continue knitting my rib for a total of 4 rounds, and then I'm going to do a bind off. So before we wrap up the vest, we need to do a neckline, and I'm so excited. I cannot wait for the reveal because it's so beautiful. Okay, let's get to work on the neckline. For the neckline, I think I'm going to keep it very simple. I'm just going to work my way around, starting in the mid-back. And of course, we want to be right side facing. Just inserting my hook somewhere in the mid-back. I'm using the same 4mm crochet hook. And for the back, I'm going to start with double crochet. Of course, you can use whatever stitch you want. Like if you wanted to do treble crochets in the back, you totally could. That's up to you. I just, again, chose to do double crochets because we'd been working a double crochet, alternating double crochet with half double crochets. So, okay. And now when it comes to working these stitches that I don't have stitches in, I'm going to work a stitch into each stitch as well, and I'm going to start reducing. Now see, if I just work there, there's a huge gap between this stitch and the other stitch. So I'm actually going to work decrease over these two stitches here. And now I'm just going to continue working single crochet around until we once again reach the back of the work. Then when we reach the back of the work, we are going to work a double crochet into each remaining stitch. We're going to slip stitch to the first double crochet to join, and for the second round we're going to work a double crochet in each double crochet, a half double crochet in each half double crochet, and a single crochet in each single crochet. This will be the last round of the neckline. Time to review our work, and I am so happy with how this vest turned out. Like, I thought I was happy with how the Galentine's vest turned out, but no, this one just surpasses all of my expectations. I'm so happy that we got this little funky V going on, that we managed to do half granny triangles and also granny triangles down here to better shape our armhole. I'm just super happy with the fit of it. Once again, I think I could have gone just a tiny bit more cropped by eliminating one row at the bottom, but it's not long enough that it's gonna bother me, and I can use it with most of my high waist pants, which was my goal for this vest, because my high waist pants tend to be very lightweight. So it's really good for combining that autumn vibe, but in a summer weather. Thank you so much for coming along on this journey with me. I hope that you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about this granny vest, and would you try it yourself? I'm going to be linking several granny square vest patterns down below in case you want to have a pattern for making your own granny square vest. Of course, there will be a blog post coming soon all about how I constructed this vest with a little diagram on how the pieces were sewn together if you need a better visual. Overall, I think that granny square vests are easy to adjust, easy to change the type of granny square you're working with, as long as you keep the dimensions in mind, that if you make a bigger granny square, you're going to have a bigger vest. So those are always just fun things to consider, and I think that's the beauty of the granny square. It is so gorgeously customizable. But before we actually say a proper goodbye, thank you so much for joining me on this crafting journey, as well as for your comments on the mending vlog. They were very kind, and it keeps me going. It fuels my creativity to know that there are people out there that find this content inspiring. Anyway, I hope that you are here with me to welcome the, as Rachel Maxey would say, crunchy spicy leaf season. I think that's what it is. Is it spicy crunchy leaf season or spicy leaf crunchy season? Either way, I hope you're looking forward to autumn and that you are enjoying some autumnal activities. I am gonna get changed out of this outfit and attempt to make another pumpkin cold foam. The first recipe that I followed was bleh. So hopefully this one will be better. Update on the pumpkin cold foam situation. I don't think it's for me. As much as I love pumpkin spice, pumpkin desserts, this pumpkin cold foam with iced tea is not for me at all. However, a chai with vanilla cold foam